The wind howled like a creature in pain across the salt-flat valley of Eurus Theta, a forgotten planet orbiting a faded star in the dead silence of the Antares Drift. The sky was a tarnished mirror, reflecting nothing but the cold truth of a place. Long abandoned, its ground cracked like old bones, and its air thick with the weight of lifetimes past. And yet, in this silence, in this place where no pulse should be, something impossibly alive arrived. It shimmered into existence like a nightmare not meant for flesh eyes, a vessel, if one could call it that, hundreds of meters across and hovering impossibly just above the surface. It made no sound, no light glowed from it. It simply was, resting on nothing, as if the universe had paused to listen to what it carried. Inside, the walls breathed with an organic shimmer, not metal, not stone, some skin-like matter that pulsed with light and rhythm like a slumbering heartbeat. And at the very center of this still, unknowable place stood them, three of them. Tall, humanoid in shape, but too smooth, too long-limbed, eyes like endless walls of starless night. They were silent. They stared not at controls or screens, but at the very air, waiting for something, for someone. One among them trembled. Its skin flickered with pain, shifting from pale blue to sickly green in streaks like veins breaking. The others didn't seem to notice, or didn't want to, or couldn't. Then the first one collapsed. Not hard, not fast, just folded in upon itself, arms drawn in like a child in fear, eyes still open but blinking slowly, as if waking from some terrible dream. Time passed, long minutes that stretched like wet paper. A sound broke the air, a rhythmic thudding, far off, footsteps, impossible here. On a world no one had stepped on in thousands of years, yet the sound came closer. The two standing aliens turned toward the sealed bulkhead. Their faces didn't move. No mouths, no eyebrows, just still pools for eyes. But fear emanated from them like heat. The door slid open, not with mechanics, but with a soft parting, like lips surrendering to breath. A figure stood there, silhouetted against a harsh, sterile sun. Small by comparison, wrapped in tattered survival gear, helmet under arm. A human. Her name was Dr. Wren Malik, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Skin sunburned, eyes sunken but bright with fire that hadn't died. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at the three forms in the chamber, then slowly knelt. Beside the collapsed one, her fingers brushing its arm with the care of someone who had buried too many things to ever be careless again. The creature blinked. So did she. And for a second, there was something recognition, maybe, or a shared fracture in the soul where fear leaks out and something like understanding seeps in. She took off her glove. The others gasped, not the aliens, but the breathless machines on her comm link, warning her of biochemical risks, nanite infection, telepathic bleed. She silenced them with a flick. Her bare hand touched its skin, and nothing happened. No pain, no virus, no transformation. Just skin to skin, warmth to warmth. And the alien flinched, but not from pain, from memory, from recognition. Outside, the sky shifted. The ship groaned, not from strain, but as if remembering a war that wasn't finished. In orbit, satellites blinked awake for the first time in centuries. In the ship's belly, something enormous stirred. Something bound. Something old. And Dr. Malik, unaware of the full scale of what was coming, only knew one thing. This being in front of her, this creature with stars in its veins and a tremble in its bones, was dying. And she couldn't let it die. Not again. Not after what happened on Io. She opened her medkit, the same one she had used on her brother when he bled out in her arms after a mining rig accident on Titan. Same tools, same antiseptic, same shaking. Fingers, but this time she wasn't alone, and neither was it. Far above, the stars blinked, some in warning, some in hope. And somewhere in the dark folds of space, something noticed that humans had touched the forgotten again, not with weapons, but with mercy. And that changed everything. Dr. Wren Malik's breath fogged the stale air inside the chamber as the warmth of her skin touched the cold. Alien flesh. The dying being did not speak, could not speak, at least not in any way she could comprehend with ears, but its trembling grew fainter, more regular, like a flame gaining steadiness when shielded from wind. Her movements were slow, deliberate. The survival instincts that years of off-world deployment had carved into her whispered warnings in the back of her skull. Don't expose skin. Don't trust what doesn't speak. Don't forget that beautiful things kill quietly. But she had long since stopped listening to that voice. It hadn't saved her then, and it wouldn't save her now. She knelt fully beside the creature and pulled out a stabilizer from her field kit. The chemical was designed for humans. It's Molecules unfamiliar to any alien biology, but it was all she had. She took a vial and crushed the ampule, letting a trace mist drift toward the being's nostrils. Nothing at first. Then its chest rose with a fragile gasp, its fingers twitching as if trying to hold on to something invisible, something slipping. Away. She leaned in closer. I don't know if this helps you, she said aloud, not because she thought it understood, but because silence had become unbearable. But I've seen people come back from worse. I've seen men with lungs filled, with fire who still found the strength to scream. I've seen children born in domes where air stank of rust, and they still learn to laugh. So don't you dare give up on me. Her voice cracked at the end. She hated that. Emotion was a luxury she rarely permitted herself, but here in this half-living vessel with a stranger from the stars lying broken in front of her, it surged forth like blood through an open vein. One of the other aliens stepped forward slowly, its motions graceful like a shadow dancing across water. It raised a hand, thin, spindled, ending in 3 long fingers, and pointed to the creature on the ground, then to Wren, then to its own chest. A gesture not of threat, but of question, of hope. I don't know what you're asking, Wren said, still kneeling, but I'll stay, I'll help. That's all I can offer. She unpacked more supplies, gauze, hydration injectors, nutrient sprays, and began treating the being. Like she would a fellow human. Every act was careful, even reverent, as if healing was a form of prayer. The alien's skin responded in subtle ways. Where she touched it, light bloomed beneath its surface in fractal shapes that shimmered and vanished like dreams fleeing morning. Its breathing grew stronger. The 2 standing figures exchanged glances, subtle tilts of their heads, quiet shifts in their posture. Wren didn't know what they meant, but she recognized the look, wonder, confusion, maybe even awe. Suddenly, the ship pulsed again, deep, low, like a warning bell ringing through its strange walls. The floor beneath Wren's boots vibrated. Light streaked across the ceiling in unfamiliar patterns. Her comlink crackled with static before going completely dead. She didn't panic. If anything, it steadied her. The alien's eyes fluttered. Open again. This time, there was clarity there. Pain and curiosity coiled together like vines. Hey, she whispered. Stay with me. A voice bloomed in her mind, not heard, not spoken, but felt. A ripple in the spine, a pressure behind. The eyes. It was not words, not exactly, but shapes and feelings. A burst of memory, a planet burning, a child hidden away in stasis, a promise made in silence. Wren gasped. Her hands tightened on the creature's arm. Was that you? Are you inside? My head. The being blinked slowly. Not a yes, not a no, but something in between. Wren steadied herself, trying to hold on to the sensations the way she'd once clutched her brother's voice recordings after he died, knowing they were echoes, but needing to believe they still meant something. I don't understand your language, she said quietly, but I know what fear looks like. I know what it means to be left behind. And I know what it's like to wake up somewhere strange, not knowing if you'll survive. The alien's chest pulsed with light again. Slower now, stronger. I won't leave you, she promised. The 2 others came closer, still cautious, but no longer hiding their intent. One reached out and touched her shoulder with surprising gentleness. She looked up at them. Their eyes, bottomless and black, reflected her face back at her, lined with fatigue and loss. And yet, for the first time in what felt like years, Wren felt seen. Not as a soldier, not as a doctor, not as a survivor. Just human. The ship's distant sounds became steady, almost rhythmic. Somewhere in its heart, something had acknowledged her presence. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing, but she stayed. On her knees, with an alien in her care and the unknown pressing in like the tide thought. It was then she realized. The question hadn't been, will you help? The question had been, can you feel? And she had answered not with logic or defense protocols or weapons drawn. She had answered with her bare hand, with kindness, and that, perhaps, was more alien than anything else in the galaxy. Night on Eurus Theta was not true darkness. It was the color of ancient things buried in dust-soft, suffocating, endless. The sky above, if one could still call it a sky, twisted with streaks of green aurora and the faint shimmer of magnetic. Storms. Time bled slowly here. The silence after the initial encounter had stretched into hours, and Wren had not moved from her place beside the injured alien. Her hands were raw, her back aching, but she stayed. The air inside the living ship grew warmer, as if the vessel itself were responding to the fragile harmony forming in its belly. Every so often, the alien's chest would rise with labored breath, and Wren would feel that same ripple, not a voice, not a thought, but an echo of memory pressed into her bones. She had learned to stop fighting it. She saw fragments. A tower, made of light shattering under bombardment. Rows of beings' children, maybe vanishing in beams of soft blue energy, not dying but being saved, hidden, forgotten. The creature beside her was one of them, a remnant of something noble and broken. And she saw fear too, not just fear of death, but of humanity. Images of humans as monsters in iron suits, burning skies, drilling into worlds not theirs to take. And then suddenly, images of Earth, oceans brimming with noise, a mother kissing her child on a train, a soldier giving his coat to a freezing refugee, beauty and cruelty mixed. Wren cried, not because the visions were overwhelming, but because she recognized the confusion. The alien had been taught to fear them, but it didn't want to believe what it had been shown. It was reaching, hesitating, hoping that she'd turn to the creature again, now resting more peacefully under the warmth of a thermal blanket she had patched together from her torn jacket. They told you we were all violence, didn't they? She whispered that we came to conquer, and some of us, some did. But some of us are just trying to make things right, to leave something better behind. She didn't know if it understood her words, but her tone softened, the alien's hand twitched, reaching toward her without command. She let her fingers close around it, marveling at the strange textures, smooth like river stones, but warm and pulsing. A new memory surged into her then, uninvited but gentle. Laughter, a high-pitched trill, like wind chimes in motion. The alien had a child. Had, or still did, it was hard to know. But the image of a small figure glowing under starlight and twirling on some low-gravity plane made her throat tighten. "You're a parent," she murmured. "You left someone behind." The alien's light dimmed, and a weight pressed into her chest that wasn't hers. Grief, not distant or philosophical, but raw and lacerating, like the feeling she'd carried for so long it had become part of her. The same pain she'd locked away when they told her the escape pod her brother had tried to reach had vaporized mid-launch. The pain she buried under science and protocols and endless missions across dead moons. Now it leaked into the space between her and this being, and instead of recoiling, the alien pulled closer. The two standing figures watched from a distance, still expressionless, but something had shifted. They no longer loomed. They stood like sentries, not just to protect the one who was hurt, but maybe to protect her too. They were silent, but she felt no threat from them anymore, just waiting, as if they too were uncertain, untrained in the art of this fragile piece. Ship reacted to the change. Vines of bioluminescent matter curled down from the ceiling, like fingers reaching toward warmth. They didn't touch her, but hovered near, pulsing faintly. She thought they might be part of the ship's nervous system, or maybe its memory. One touched the alien's forehead, and then gently traced the air around Wren's shoulder. It stopped, an inch above her skin, then flickered and receded, leaving behind a faint warmth and an imprint of stars she didn't recognize. "Are you scanning me?" she asked, half smiling. "Or is that your way of saying thank you?" The injured one stirred again. Its lips then slits before now, unnoticed, moved slightly. Not sound, not speech, but it was trying. Trying to mimic, maybe, or reach further. Wren's eyes filled again, and this time she didn't wipe the tears away. She let them fall. "Maybe we can teach each other," she said softly. "Maybe you'll learn our words, and I'll learn your thoughts. And maybe, someday, we won't be afraid of each other anymore." The alien responded not with words, but with a pulse of light across its chest, then a faint echo inside her skull. Trust ... grows. A voice. Faint and alien, but shaped enough to carry meaning. Wren laughed, a broken but beautiful sound that startled even her. "Yeah," she said, "it does." And in that quiet, amid machines older than any human civilization, inside a ship grown from technology and memory, something bloomed. Not in the physical sense, but in the unseen current that runs between souls willing to risk themselves for understanding. That spark, so small and easily crushed, had taken root. Between a human haunted by guilt and a being lost to time and war, something ancient and precious had begun to stir. The courage to believe in one another. The ship's pulse changed. Wren had come to recognize its soft, breathing rhythm over the past hours, subtle like the tides, a background hum of something. Ancient, still alive. But now the pulse turned jagged, like a warning sent through bone instead of air. The lights dimmed to deep violet, and the two standing aliens stepped back from her, heads tilting sharply toward the walls, as if listening to a voice she could not hear. The injured one beside her stirred again, a flicker of panic running through its limbs. Its chest lit up in frantic bursts, not of pain, but urgency. She grabbed its hand instinctively. "What is it?" she asked. "What's happening?" The ship shuddered beneath her, one long low groan, like something being dragged out of sleep it had never wanted. From the ceiling, a spire descended. It was made of the same living material as the ship's skin, but shaped now into a form unmistakable, a pod, like a memory capsule or a sarcophagus. It opened with slow tendrils, and inside was not a body, but an image, holographic, flickering, glitching as though the ship itself were ashamed of what it was about to show. And then the truth bled into the room like poison. A scene played out. Humans in battlesuits, their visors glowing red as they marched across a planet Wren didn't recognize. A planet with mountains that shimmered like crystal and skies the color of opals. There were cities there, tall and curved, built from light and voice. And there were these creatures, her patient and its kin peaceful, extending hands in offering. But the humans had not listened. Missiles fired. Plasma beams tore holes through art and innocence. The ground blackened with fire. The beings fell one by one, not in defense, but in confusion, betrayal written across their luminous faces. Then came a voice her own species broadcasting. In cold, clipped tones, non-compliant alien race. Refused terraformation protocols. Assets neutralized. Wren watched in horror. She shook her head, bile rising in her throat. "No, that wasn't us. That's not who we are." But even as she said it, a deep part of her knew the truth. Somewhere in the vast expanse of human expansion, someone had made this decision. It had probably been wrapped in bureaucracy, shrouded in necessity. But to these beings, it was genocide. One of the standing aliens turned to her, and for the first time, its voice reached into her mind, not a whisper, not a pulse, but clear. Cold language shaped into meaning. "You destroyed our world?" Wren could not answer. Her lips parted. But no defense came. Only silence, only grief. The injured alien beside her trembled. She turned to it, gripping its hand tighter, as if her guilt could offer warmth. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I wasn't there." The voice came. "Again, but you came here. You stepped aboard our ship. You touched one of us. That means something else." The image shifted again. A new memory, one more recent. A pod, small, hiding beneath ice on some distant moon. Inside it a child. The same glowing laughter from earlier in Wren's mind, but now tinged with fear. The injured one had hidden its offspring during the attack. It had survived, alone, somewhere still waiting. And suddenly, Wren understood what this whole ship was. It wasn't just a vessel. It was a beacon, a lifeboat. A memory archive screaming. "Into the void, find my child. Tell them I love them." The ship had not summoned her by accident. It had called out with grief so immense, it had broken the silence of space. And something in her, something broken, but not dead, had answered. Wren fell to her knees again, hands trembling now not from cold, but shame. "We can't change what we did," she said, "but we can try to make something from it. Please, let me help. Let me find them, your child. Let me bring them back to you." The two aliens stared. The air seemed to still, even the ship waited. Then the injured one pressed its palm to her chest, not forceful, not symbolic, but a gesture of trust, and then images rushed into her. Coordinates, star maps, a system barely known to human navigation. The child's last location hidden in an asteroid belt behind a dying red dwarf. Time was running out. The stasis would fail within days. The other two aliens approached now. One reached her pack and gently pulled out her datapad. Its long fingers danced across the interface, linking with it effortlessly, transferring data. She could barely perceive. They were giving her everything: where to go, how to reach the stasis pod, how to bypass the defense grid that protected it. They were giving her a mission born from their last fragile hope. "I'll do it," Wren said, standing slowly, the weight of this new truth pressing down on her like gravity. "I'll bring them home." And somewhere deep in the ship, a light bloomed, not warning, not sorrow, but something purer. Like faith. And the ship, ancient and wounded, whispered into the stars once more, not with desperation, but with belief. The truth had been revealed. And now the choice was hers. Asterisk, the ship released her like a reluctant mother sending a child into a storm, folding open its living walls and lowering a ramp that met the cracked surface of Eros Theta, with a hiss of parting dust. Wren stood alone beneath the fading sky, datapad clutched to her chest, the echo of that final gesture from the injured alien still lingering in her mind like a heartbeat. Behind her, the three figures remained silhouetted in the ship's threshold, their forms now bound to the place where so much had been lost, and now, maybe, something could be found again. The coordinates etched into her memory flickered in her vision with haunting clarity. The stasis pod lay in the Thanex belt, a minefield of shattered moons and unstable gravities no ship in her fleet had dared traverse. But the child was there, alone, waiting, unaware that time was peeling away its protections like skin off bone. Wren's transport patched, half burnt from re-entry, its eye half-functional waited a kilometer away. Her legs ached with each step across the broken plains, but she walked fast, driven by the kind of urgency that doesn't come from orders or duty, but something deeper, a promise. A debt, the vessel loomed like a scar on the land, once a scientific exploration nodule, now barely held together by graphs of salvaged alien tech and stubborn human engineering. She climbed aboard and fired the engines before the door fully sealed, setting her path toward the belt without checking the oxygen levels or the rations. There was no time. And perhaps, somewhere beneath her determination, she didn't plan on needing a return trip. The journey stretched into hours that bled into a day. The stars outside blurred, and her only company was the static lullaby of a dying AI and the slow, throbbing ache in her side, a wound she hadn't treated properly, too busy keeping the alien alive. Her sleep came in fractured pieces. She dreamed of the stasis pod, of the child inside, cold and breathing only in memory. She dreamed of the war she had never seen, but had helped build through silence. And she dreamed of her brother, holding her hand in that mining shaft while blood filled his lungs, and he whispered through the pain, "Make it matter." By the time she reached the Thanex belt, her hands were shaking with exhaustion, and the ship's hull had already started to groan under the gravitational stress. The navigation display fractured with interference, and debris spun past the windows like shrapnel hurled by the dead. Her hands danced across the controls, weaving through the narrow path given to her by the alien's memory map. It was like threading a needle between chaos and collapse. Once her ship clipped a frozen moonlet, an alarm screamed, but she kept flying. Another time, a low gravity pocket spun the ship nearly upside down, and she vomited into her collar, blinking. Stars from her vision. But still she flew. Then she saw it, tucked inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Hidden behind radiation shadows and cloaked in dimensional static, there it was. The pod. Small. Silent. Pale blue light still emanating from its base like the breath of a sleeping child. She maneuvered closer, guiding her craft into a rough magnetic dock. The engines coughed and died, probably for the last time. As she floated across the airlock and toward the pod, something cold began to rise in her chest. The stasis field flickered weakly. Her datapad confirmed the worst. Less than 4 hours of life support left. Any delay, any mistake, and the child would die. She knelt before the pod and opened her emergency toolkit, fingers moving through familiar motions with unfamiliar desperation. The biometric seal didn't recognize her, but the alien's data worked, just barely her system. Pulsed with a signature left behind like a digital fingerprint. The lid peeled open. A soft hiss escaped, followed by silence. Inside was the child. Tiny, curled into a fetal position, translucent skin glowing faintly with internal bylight, eyes closed, breath slow. A rhythm like a bird's wing beating against glass. Wren reached in, scooping the small body into her arms. It weighed almost nothing, but felt impossibly heavy. The fragility of it made her heart seize, but then came the sound, from the corner of the asteroid chamber. A hiss, mechanical, unnatural. Her head snapped toward it, eyes wide. A small drone emerged from the rock wall human-made. Surveillance, armed. She recognized the model. A recon unit from the terraformation fleets. And she remembered what they were trained to do. Eliminate non-compliant biologicals. Even children. No, she whispered, rising to shield the child with her body. The drone scanned her, hesitated. Her badge, her DNA, her authorization, it flashed green. But the child in her arms flashed red. Unauthorized life form. High risk. Initiate protocol. No. She screamed, diving sideways as the drone charged a bolt of kinetic energy. The shot missed, shattering rock beside her. She ran, through the tunnel, back to her ship, knowing full well it wouldn't fly, but hoping desperate, primal that she could at least send a message. Behind her, the drone gave chase. It was fast, Too fast. She stumbled, scraping her shoulder against jagged crystal. The child whimpered softly, waking, its eyes opening bright and golden, full of the same light she'd seen in its parent. The child stared at her, not with fear, but with absolute terrifying trust. Wren turned, clutching the child to her chest. The drone hovered, aim set. She had 1 second, maybe less dot, and then she threw herself into the airlock, slammed the manual. Overeyed, and felt the blast door slam shut just as a crackling explosion echoed behind her. The drone's bolt struck the outer hull. The child trembled in her arms, eyes wide. "We're okay," she gasped, chest heaving. "You're okay." But they weren't. Not yet. The ship was damaged. No fuel. Life support limited. And somewhere, out there, more drones were coming. She looked down at the child. So small. So trusting Dot she had saved it. For now, but at what cost? Wren's breath came in shallow bursts as she leaned against the fractured wall of her vessel's cockpit. Child swaddled tightly against her chest in what scraps of thermal cloth she could find. Blood soaked through her left sleeve where a shard of hull plating had bitten deep, but she ignored it. Pain had become background noise. What mattered now was survival, and the growing tension in the child's body. It had not cried. It had not screamed. It simply trembled in her arms like a tuning fork, resonating with something she couldn't hear yet, something that pressed closer with every second. The ship's internal systems flickered under emergency power. Atmosphere stable. For now, thrusters dead. Communication array partially responsive. Just enough dot Wren keyed in a transmission, a direct pulse, not to the human fleet, not to any relay station, but to the living ship back on Eurostata, to the beings who had trusted her when they had every reason not to. Static answered, then a whisper. Not sound, not language, something like recognition brushing her spine. She sent the coordinates. She sent one word. A live dot the child's hand brushed her cheek, soft and curious. She looked into those golden eyes again and saw not fear but memory. A thread of light passed from the child into her, like a dream half remembered. In that instant, Wren felt it all. The child's birth in a cradle of starlight, the songs of its people echoing through shimmering gardens, the silence that followed the day the sky burned red. The child had never seen its parent since. Had never known why it was hidden, why the stars had grown so quiet. Wren's chest clenched as she realized she had become the bridge between these worlds. Not just a rescuer, not just a witness, but something more dangerous. A protector. The ship shuddered. Her sensor panel glowed red. 3 new contacts. Small. Fast. Drones. Not reconnaissance this time, military grade. She didn't need confirmation. The humans had picked up her signal. They knew what she carried. And they were coming to finish the job. Wren rose with difficulty, limping to the navigation console and typing in emergency thrust protocols. Nothing. The engines were dead. A second wave of sweat broke down her neck. There was no way out unless she made one. The cargo hold still held. An old mining escape rig, barely operational, designed for 1 occupant. No weapons, just minimal shielding and a hard-coded drive system meant to punch through asteroid belts. She could use it to slingshot the child back toward Eros Theta. One-way flight. But it would need a pilot to aim, to launch it. And she knew it couldn't be the child. She looked down at it, at the tiny creature watching her now, not with innocence, but understanding. It knew. It had seen enough in her memories, had touched enough of her soul, to realize what she was thinking. No. She whispered to herself, then louder, as if saying it aloud could change the math. No, there has to be another way. But there wasn't, not with time counting down. Not with 3 drones already in the outer perimeter, closing fast. The child reached up and touched her temple again. A single memory flowed back. Not war. Not death. But hope its parent, the injured alien back on Eros Theta, holding a starlight pendant in its hands and humming a melody that vibrated with the pulse of the ship. That pendant was in the child's neck pouch now. Wren understood. The song, the signal, the identity. It would lead the ship to the pod. But it would not reach unless someone launched it. The airlock groaned. Proximity alert flared. She strapped the child into the rig. Her hand shook. She whispered nonsense words her brother had once sung to her during solar storms. Lullabies half-remembered, soaked in grief. The child touched her lips with 1 finger. That gentle, alien gesture. A goodbye dot, she sealed the pod and primed the launch. A burst of motion on the Monitor 1 drone now at the hull. Preparing to breach. You won't have it, she hissed Wren. rerouted the last vestiges of power to the rig's launch coil. She glanced at the monitor one final time, confirmation of trajectory of signal lock. She opened the bay doors. Space yawned open like a silent grave. But she didn't feel fear. She felt something like peace. Then she punched the launch. The pod screamed through the throes. Vacuum like a silver seed shot into the dark. Behind her, the hull buckled. The first drone tore through with a deafening roar. Wren grabbed the only thing left, a flare torch. Not a weapon, not really, but enough to blind sensors. She stood in front of the breach, blood soaking her leg now, and held the torch like a blade. "You don't get to take this one," she said, voice calm. "You already took too much." The drone scanned her. Calculated. Threat level. Prepared to fire, but something stopped it. From behind it, in orbit, a shape unfurled. The alien ship Data had come. A flash of light filled the asteroid belt, not a weapon, but a pulse of gravity and energy that sent the drone spinning. Into the rocks. Two more followed, caught in the wake. And Wren, bruised, bloody, weeping, watched through the breach as the pod she launched was cradled mid-space by tendrils of living metal. Pulled into the alien ship's embrace like a heartbeat returned. The child was safe, and Wren fell to her knees, a torch clattering beside her. Her final stand no longer necessary. She had done what humanity rarely remembered how to do. She chose to protect life, even at the cost of her own. And in that choice, something ancient and sacred was rekindled. The stars above Eurus Theta shimmered with unusual warmth, as if the void itself was holding its breath. The massive alien vessel hovered again above the salt flats, silent and dignified, its hull pulsing with waves of bioluminescent light and slow, mournful rhythms. A new glow now pulsed from its heart, gentler, warmer, as if some sacred cycle had completed. Inside, the injured alien stood upright at last, its posture still weak, but no longer trembling. At its side was the child, reunited, alive, eyes radiant with golden light that mirrored its parents. They stood in silence, their foreheads gently touching, a gesture of reunion, of soul-deep recognition, of loss now made whole. Around them, the living walls of the ship hummed in a low tone, like the sound of a choir whose language had no words, only feeling. The echoes of what had been lost rippled through the vessel, but now they were joined by something else. Something new. A memory not born of their kind, but carried into them like a gift. Dr. Wren Malik's final moments had imprinted themselves into the ship. Not in a recording. Not in language, but in something deeper, her choices, her pain, her love. Her fierce, unbreakable need to make the death of her brother matter. To make the broken pieces of humanity mean something more than conquest. Her final stand, torch raised, blood soaking her flight suit, whispering lullabies to a child not her own, had become a sacred legend inside a species that had once sworn never to trust again. She had not begged for forgiveness. She had not asked to be redeemed. She had simply done what had to be done. And in doing so, she had healed more than a family. She had cracked open a truth larger than any war could ever silence, that humans, when stripped of armor and pride, could still bleed for someone else. Now, the child held tightly in its parents' arms turned to the others, the two sentinels who had never left the ship's side. They bowed, a sign of reverence, not just for the child's return, but for the one who had made it possible. One of them placed a soft, petal-like object at the center of the ship's core, where light swirled like a galactic wound. A tribute. The object pulsed once, and Wren's face appeared in the glow, not perfect, not whole, but real, her eyes wide and kind, her expression full of quiet defiance. Then the image dissolved, becoming starlight. The ship lifted again, higher this time, not to flee, not to hide, but to be seen. In orbit above, the remaining human drones, now powerless before the alien vessel's presence, drifted without direction. A transmission pulsed outward, not in threat, not in warning, but in invitation. A message carried on light and emotion, encoded not in binary, but in memory. Humans would receive it and be changed by it, though many wouldn't understand how or why. The message simply said, she chose love. Far below, on the surface of Eurus Theta, Wren's body lay within the cracked shell of her ruined ship. The flare torch still burned faintly beside her, casting long shadows against the walls. Her face was peaceful, the corners of her mouth turned in the gentlest smile. No marks of violence, no trauma, just stillness. Her hands folded over her chest cradled the broken remains of her brother's dog tags. A final comfort, a full circle, hours passed. Then days. A human rescue team, following her last pulse transmission, arrived on the planet, expecting ruins, maybe conflict. What they Found instead was a world transformed. The area around her ship shimmered with strange growth alien plant life curling from the cracked soil, bioluminescent tendrils entwined in protective rings. A natural burial, sacred and untouched. The scientists didn't disturb it. They knew. Better. They named the site Malik's Hope. Her story would spread, but not like a viral report or a military citation. It would move quietly, pass from pilot to pilot, medic to medic. A woman who stared down machines and didn't fire. A woman who gave her last breath to save someone humanity had once tried to erase. It wouldn't be taught in military schools, but it would be remembered in the hushed voices of those who knew what it meant to hold a life in their hands and choose mercy. And as for the alien child years later, it would grow to carry the memory of Wren within itself. It would speak her name in a new language, one shaped by both its own culture and the echoes of humanity. It would become a branch, not through treaties or politics, but through stories. And every time it told the tale, it would always end the same way. She stayed, she fought, she chose a star, and somewhere, in the unseen architecture of the universe, that choice burned brighter than any star. Asterisk.